Hello, how's it going today? So today, on my mind was the big question: Am I happy? What is happiness? And is it just adding up all the pluses in your life and the negatives in your life and seeing what the balance is? And if it's positive, you're happy, and if it's negative, you're unhappy, and if it's zero, then no, meh. And that's sort of a very utilitarian point of view, maybe utilitarian within one person. And perhaps you could even call that hedonism, where happiness is basically just a giant ledger, like an accountant would keep of here's all the pleasure, do 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 do, here's all the pain, do 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 do, and at the end either in the black or in the red. And essentially your job as the ledger keeper, as the accountant of happiness or unhappiness of your life, is to maximize pleasure and minimize pain the way someone running a business would do. And that kind of brings up the question of, can you measure pain in a numerical way or a cardinal way? And it's not just, I like sleeping more than I like getting punched in the face. It's more of a comparative thing. In the grand scheme of things, sleeping is better than getting punched in the face. Getting shot in the belly is even lower. Being tortured to death is even lower, so you can sort of compare them in an order, but you're really going negative with the torture. While sleeping is pretty good, it's not amazing. Can you measure them in terms of maybe assigning it a value, like a number? Uh, I don't really think so. Um, no, that would make you ask not just what's going on now, but what was going on in the past and going on in the future. You're going to have to sort of run basically time. You're going to put time factor into this. Are you twice as happy today as you were yesterday? I mean, you can do that with certain things. You can do it with weight. You can do it with wealth. You can do it with all sorts of things. But the thing is that the in that is, can you measure things? And that's the thing, is if you can't really measure pain with a number, is you have a very difficult way of comparing things across time or even today. Um, and it also brings up the fact is, can you actually compare happiness to unhappiness? Is happiness just the negative? Is unhappiness just negative happiness? At some point, if you see happiness as a continuum, like a one-dimensional line, and in the middle is zero, which is sort of maybe feeling numb. And if you go in a positive direction, like a number line, the positive numbers would be happiness. So if you're over on this side, you're happy. But if you're over on that side, you're unhappy. All you have to do is just push yourself over here and you're happy. Does it really work that way? And this kind of brings up the concept of maybe a happiness version, or in economics they call it utility, where in the case of something that was called risk averseness, is on the whole you would rather avoid pain than seek pleasure. Pain is more painful to you than pleasure, in the same ballpark. So usually you can qualify this as losing money or gaining money. That losing $1,000,000 is way worse than winning $1,000,000 is good. So winning $1,000,000 is not as good, is not as big of a feeling in a positive sense as losing $1,000,000 is in a negative sense. And so we're sort of biased in the direction of avoiding pain. And so you might say that in this case that keeping a ledger is the only way to do this in terms of money, weight, or anything. You can do this. You have to use measurements, but in the case you can't do that, it's actually quite difficult to judge that when you can't measure things. So that's one thing. And how would you even do that? I mean, and then all pains are not equal. There's mental pain and there's physical pain. What is worse? I guess that really depends on you. Some people can deal with all kinds of abuse, but they turn into instant wimps the moment they get a scratch. And on the other side of the coin is that people can deal with all kinds of physical pain, but the moment anybody steps, kind of puts them through the ringer mentally, they just totally crumble. And that's not always, you've probably known people who are of both extremes. I think most of us are sort of in the middle. So that makes you think like, well, what is the determinant? What are we measuring in this case? Are we measuring pain receptors? Because some people have more pain receptors in their body, which means they feel they're more sensitive to pain and more sensitive to pleasure. So they might react differently to the same thing. Likewise, mental happiness, unhappiness, pleasure, pain, dopamine levels might, something positive might really be positive for one person, but negative, not quite as positive for another person. Likewise, people who get depressed are probably more likely to feel depressed because of some kind of, they might take bad news. I certainly am one of those people where I take bad news a little bit more heavily than most people. At least that's what I feel. And that's just within yourself. If you're comparing across people, that's even more difficult. And then across time, things that made me happy when I was a kid, or upset as a kid, I don't do that anymore. If I don't get my way, I don't stomp my feet and out in the corner. I just sort of roll my eyes or just take it on the chin and know that I can survive this. I can survive not getting pizza tonight. I can, and likewise, if a lot of children will, they will just start crying the instant they see blood. Physical pain is not what it is when you're older, or younger. Perhaps that's just, just being able to deal with it. I've done with this, there's an experience factor of I've been able to deal with a lot of pain in the past. So this is nothing compared to that one time that I sprained my ankle or whatever, or had a kid or something like that, or got shot, or you can always draw on your experience to diminish the pain of the past. And likewise, you can do the same with the with pleasure. That drug addicts are always trying to get to relive the experience of that first high on whatever they're addicted to, and they can never do it. It just starts diminishing, and they're stuck with what the negative part of the drug, because there is no more positive aspect to it. So, and it kind of, that makes you think like, are you, your mind changes, your body changes, and what it can deal with as far as pain and pleasure. But that makes you think like, if you don't feel the same pain and pleasure you did when you were a kid, are you the same person? Well, you answer to the same name. You probably have the same social security number. You probably have more or less the same DNA. But you're probably not the same person as you were about 20 years ago, or even 5 minutes ago. There's a Greek philosopher named Heraclitus who was known to be a bit of a crank. And he had a saying, I don't know if it's truly attributed to him, or if it's, like that it was actually his quote, or if it was just somebody, oh yeah, I think Heraclitus said that. Then no man ever steps in the same river twice, because essentially you're not the same person stepping into the river, and since the river flows, the water has basically made the river something new. So you're never the same person. You're never in the same circumstance. So everything is changing all at once. And so there's this sort of idea of impermanence in the world. So as if things weren't complicated enough, you can't even compare yourself to yourself. And I really think at the end of it, it's like we all want happiness, but most of us don't even know what that is. Do you know what would make you happy? We all have ideas. Um, so but we can't. I don't even know if you have the thing. Okay, I want a wife, a family, kids, a decent paying job. I want to go on vacation once in a while. I want to have a nice car. Are you sure that's going to make you happy? Um, Are you sure that you just want to be happy? And these are some things that you've seen other people being happy about. Remember that you can't compare yourself to somebody else, because what really gets people going, one person get you going. Like, to be honest, like some people are really into comic books. I could not think of anything more dull than reading comic books. I don't want to dump on them. That's their world. I just don't live in it. I just view it from afar. But I know that wouldn't make me happy, because you can actually go and try a comic book and say, this is not my thing. So it makes you wonder, okay, well, where do you start? You can start kind of small. This is the fun thing about being young and being a kid, is that you can go out and find things that uh, really get your motor going. That you can try different sports. You can try playing music. You can try, I don't know, acting. You can try doing, uh, scientific experiments. Whatever gets you going. And you say, I just don't like it, and eventually you'll find it. So it's, in a sense, that some parts of happiness is trial and error, but some attempts at trial and error are just too expensive, especially as you get older. If you're feeling kind of listless, then it's really expensive to get involved with, say, something at the age of 40, like picking up boxing at 40. One, you're never going to be that great because you're a little bit behind the time. Anybody that you'd be fighting, even at your own age, has probably been doing it most of his life. So that's an expensive form of trial and error, but you could pick up cooking. It's not very expensive, but a lot of people turn a hobby into a career. Um, and I think that's kind of the only thing to do. I mean, in some cases, you can look at people, say, for example, that one way of people doing this is that looking for something that make them happy is they look at other people. Remember, you can't always look at them and agree with them, but you can say, well, I can give it a try, so long as it's not too costly. But um, it's just, I honestly, at this point, I have to throw up my hands and say I'm not really sure. I'm probably not the person to be asking what makes people happy. It's really different from individual to individual, but I know that everybody wants to be happy. And so, if you found you consider yourself incredibly lucky, because a lot of people don't know it. And another thing about happiness, looking for happiness, is that I think happiness, like looking for happiness, relies on a compass, happiness compass, if you want to call it that, where um, you're going in the right direction. Okay, happiness is somewhere over there. If I start going in that direction, maybe I'll find it. Well, one of the problems is if you've had a lot of mental anguish in your life, it might throw your compass off in the same way that maybe a giant magnet would, where it just sends it spinning all over the place, because your brain is so scrambled that, with pain and torture of, uh, not having friends, not having relationships, being in abusive relationships often. No relationship is better than an abusive one. So when you're in a really bad spot, I don't think you can find happiness. You just got to get out of the bad spot and then let the dust settle. Have someone guide you through the process of it, because you have no compass. You need a guide. Compass is your guide. If your compass is crap, you need to get rid of it and find a new one. Um, and so that really throws us off. And I think, that it's not just that. It's like long-term unhappiness that you have like physical, like sort of physiological things like actual clinical depression, or you've been poor for so long that you just have this poor mentality, or you you might have been sick for a long time, and so you kind of forget how to function as a human being, and that might make it impossible to be happy. I'll just wrap this up with a story that I read about King Henry VIII. So Henry VIII, his father basically saved England from a civil war, or stopped the civil war, called the Wars of the Roses, which happened in the last half of the 1400s. Basically, there were two families in England that were fighting over the crown, and they just ended up killing each other left and right. And the only one standing around was Henry VII. Henry VII was a fairly successful king, and his son, his heir to the throne, was named Arthur. Now, Arthur was engaged to be married to the queen, or to the princess, uh, Infanta of Spain. So this is the eldest daughter of the King of Spain, or the sister of the King of Spain. I don't remember which one it is. Her name was Catherine. And by all accounts, it was just sort of set up as a sort of way of concluding a peace. Often when they signed a treaty, a couple people got married to, under the pretext of, like, you're not going to declare war on your wife's family, are you? And that was kind of the way things were settled. And then Arthur got sick right after they got married and died. And so Henry VIII took over. He became the heir to Henry VII's throne, and then actually became king of England. And he had married Catherine, his brother's widow, under the pretext that it was claimed that the marriage had never been consummated, and so was never a proper marriage. It was just technically a marriage. It was annulled. And basically it was not seen as dirty to marry your brother's widow. And so they got married, and by all accounts, he was very much in love with her. And then before he became king, he was a big guy, big into jousting. He was a very tall man. If you go to the Tower of London, you will see his armor there with he thought very highly of himself, and you just need to look at his codpiece in the armor to think how highly he thought of himself. And so he was very much into jousting, and one day he was practicing this tournament, and he got knocked off his horse, and he fell on his back, and he was in, I assume it sounds like a pinched nerve, but he was in pain for the rest of his life. And people who knew him before the accident and then after the accident said how accident totally changed who he was. That physical change made him crank. He was a very vivacious, friendly man, and suddenly he just fell apart. Sometimes that can happen. And he became the crankiest man in England for the rest of his life. So I'll see you soon.